Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work 12 podcast. I'm Taylor, and guys, Faith is here.
I'm back. I'm here. Yeah.
And our guest, Jarrell, which I will get to in a moment. But yes, Faith has been on maternity leave, and she's back with
Yes.
us part-time-ish.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm
welcome
happy
back,
to be
Faith.
here. I'm excited. I couldn't miss this. I had to join for Jarrell because his story is just too cool to miss. So, yeah,
Yes.
back part-time-ish. That's a good way to put it, I think.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, we are talking again about tech social work, which I am just really becoming obsessed with. And
Hmm.
like as a listener, you may be hearing a lot of tech social work episodes like in the, just in the future because this is just such a fascinating field. And I talked with Leslie and she was on the podcast and she connected me with Darrell, who works at Spotify. There's a social worker who works at Spotify. Crazy. So we're here to talk about his journey and the things that he does and all of that. So yeah, Jarrell, if you could just share briefly what you do.
Yeah. Thank you so
Yes.
much for having me. I'm really excited to be having a conversation with you all and helping social workers understand all the ways you can add value in different places. So, I'm a director and I'm the head of global content policy at Spotify. So, my team is responsible essentially for researching and writing what we call the platform rules. And so, these rules govern all of the content on the platform, everything from music and podcasts and audiobooks and playlists and all of those things. And we cover um, every content issue from abuse and harassment to violent extremism to issues that impact youth and minors on our platform. What I like to say is if it's happening offline, it's happening in online spaces too, right? And
Yes.
it's a very it seems to make a lot of sense to folks given how much we live our lives online. But when people sign into their favorite app, they're not thinking about all the risks of not just only being there, but hosting content and sharing personal things
Mm.
about yourself. So my team is responsible for that primarily. But we also work with a lot of global experts who advise us on how do we involve our platform and our policies and our products in really safe ways, not just in compliance with regulations and all the laws that govern a lot of the places where the platform operates. But if we're going to bring a new feature, how do we make sure it is safe by default? And one of the things that Taylor and I spoke about in the past is features that acknowledge that people are on a mental health spectrum, for
Mm.
example, too, and policies that acknowledge that. A lot of policies assume that everyone's having a really amazing day or week and is fully socially evolved and aware. But we know that some people using our platform are depressed and are thinking about suicidal ideation, for example. So we don't want policies that punish those folks. We want interventions that provide them resources in real time, meet them where they are, and let them know folks are worried and thinking about them. That's at a core of what my team does.
Yeah. I love that you said like
Fascinating.
if it's happening offline, it's happening
Hmm.
online. And that's like I was just telling Faith before we got on this was that's kind of I feel like the epiphany that I had this week where I was just like, do we need the amount like the same workforce that we have for
Hmm.
social workers in person? Do we need that same amount of manpower like online? We do, right? Like it's just, I
Yeah.
don't know, it's just mind-blowing because it's just not something that we really talk about in school and just this
Hmm.
being a path that's possible, which so obviously is why we're so excited for you to be here.
Yeah.
But in terms of, let's start with, we're going to get back to what you do and some other things because
Yeah.
so interesting. But in terms of like your journey into social work, early career, like what drew you into social work? Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about your, internships and just kind of like your
Yeah.
progression?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I graduated from undergrad, we were in a recession. The economy had just tanked, so there were no jobs. And I had a lot of student loan debt, so I was really focused on getting this high paying job because I went to a good school and coming out, and that's not what happened. But even in recessions, like the helping professions are always hiring and they need folks because people are struggling, especially during those times. And so my first job was providing direct services. I was working with people with severe mental illness doing rehabilitation coordination. So I would go to their house, talk to them about their treatment plan, make sure they were taking their medication, take them to their
Mm.
appointments, etc. And then from there, I moved on to low-income families and seniors. I worked for Head Start in DC, and
Okay.
I really, really loved that work. The challenge that I felt in direct services is the people who decide what programs get funding, what best practices are out there, or even the kind of things we highlight, often never had to worry about food or healthcare or housing or education.
Right.
And so I wanted to transition into roles that help me kind of address some of the systemic issues that create the inequality that we see and that we try to manage every day, as opposed to just helping people be okay in
Hmm.
their current situation. And so I ended up going to University of Maryland because they offered a dual program, macro and a clinical. Everyone does clinical your first year, and then you could do macro. So my first internship was with a soup kitchen called So Others Might Eat in DC, which was fantastic, a really, really incredible organization. And then my second placement actually ended up being at the White House, the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And there was a social worker there who had been career public servant, and she helped me start thinking about how social work skills are valuable in a macro
Mm.
setting, particularly on that kinds of work that we were doing. She helped me think about influence skills. She helped me think about advocacy and not just shining a light, but using storytelling to compel people to action. All things that I
Mm.
knew in a really, really small clinical sense, but never at the scale of like the federal government. And then from there, I moved on to a national nonprofit in San Francisco, doing work to help increase access to higher education and healthcare for young people in California. And then I got laid off.
Mm.
And I had just moved across the country, and I was living in San Francisco, which is very expensive, and I had no job.
Hmm.
And a friend was like, "You live in San Francisco, why don't you work in tech? Did you know that Twitter is hiring for their trust and safety team?" And I was like, "I don't have a Twitter account, and what the hell is trust and safety?" Right. And so
Right.
after a lot of informational interviews with folks who worked there, none of them were social workers that I met, but they came from government entities. Primarily, some of them came from law enforcement, or they came from big
Mm.
nonprofits focused on human rights and those kind of things. And when they told me the issues that they worked on, I was sold after the first conversation. So I was lucky enough to get an interview and get through the process and really demonstrate my value. And I've been doing that work for about the past 10 years now.
Wow. That's that's really cool to hear kind of your like progression in into tech and kind of your early experiences. Do
Yeah.
you feel like if you were to look back, in those first few years after grad school or even like in your field placement, are there like professions you wish you had heard about or different career possibilities you wish you had heard about at that time? Or do
Mhm.
you feel like you got a good, I don't know, layout of different opportunities, or do you feel like it was pretty siloed or limited?
Yeah, it wasn't limited. I imagined
Yeah.
at the time finishing my degree that I would go into politics or public policy. But even
Mm.
then, that was in the context of like some of the big foundations or the big nonprofits. Maybe a federal employee, but I didn't really like that, if I'm being honest. Tech was not on my radar at all. Also, I was on the East Coast, and we don't talk about Silicon Valley and all that. So, like, who cares? It's a distraction at that time. When you live in San
Mm.
Francisco, that is all you talk about, right? And
Mm.
living in
Hmm.
DC, either you work for as a consultant or you work for the federal government. That's what folks were thinking
Right.
about. Tech was not on the radar at all. And then
Hmm.
also, even when I was in SF and I would meet tech people all the time, I'm like, I'm not technical. I can't build anything. I'm not an engineer, so you don't need me. But then joining one
Right.
of these companies, you realize that it's a company. So it's got every single kind of job that you would need to run a business. Engineering is part of
Mm.
it, which is why they're a tech company. They've got lots of engineers on staff, but they also have marketing, comms, PR, trust and safety, public policy, right? They got all those things. And a lot of the big tech companies have massage therapists and regular therapists and all these folks on staff for their employees because of their benefits they provide. So there's actually so many jobs in a tech company that aren't just writing code.
Wow.
That's really cool to hear too, because I think, right, when you think about tech, it's like social workers in tech.
It's like,
Like,
I'm not an
what?
engineer.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm not technical. Like,
Yeah,
I
I
work with
can't build
people,
anything. I have been trying,
Yeah.
though. I feel like that would be
Okay.
the ultimate
Sick.
flex. Because I'll talk
Oh,
about this,
yeah.
but a lot of my work is collaborative, and we work with engineers all
Hmm.
the time. And a lot of times, engineers are like, yes, I could build that thing for you, but we got to deprioritize it. And I would love to go in and be like, actually, I'm glad you're on board because I wrote the code myself. Like, here you go, like deploy it.
Yeah,
So I'll let you all
Jarrell.
know when I can do that. But right
I
now,
love that.
not technical.
Yeah, yeah, for
That's
sure.
sick. Yeah.
Um, so when you were transitioning like into Twitter, I remember when we had talked about how you kind of had to educate managers and the people who were
Mm.
hiring you and in these, interviews about like
Yeah.
what social workers do, and we don't only just take kids away. And so
Hmm.
I'm just curious
Hmm.
about like just how that interview process was, and was it difficult, and just
Yeah,
yeah.
it was hard. It was really, really hard. It was that translation of the skill. So the things I would get is like some rude things like social workers just take kids away. How could you add value? Right? Like really honest.
Mm.
I heard that from a recruiter. I'm not going to say what company, but that hurt. I was like, you just don't know a lot of social workers and what
Yeah.
we do and the kind of value we add to societies at large, right? But I think that question of here's someone who's hiring for a particular role on a trust and safety team, and they're trying to find out who is really good at that, and they're not thinking about me. In most cases, they're thinking about, well, who did this at another company, right? I'm going to pick that person first because they can do it there, they can do it here, and so you have to do a lot of translating for them around how the skills and experience and training that you have could add value there. And so the things I think about is tech environments are fast paced, right? They are constantly shifting and moving and reprioritizing. And so I spoke a lot to that in my resume and my interviews, having to switch priorities based on funding, based on interests of
Right.
the organization. I think a lot of people are like, oh, nonprofits are so different than for profits. But if the thing doesn't make money or get funding, then they're not going to do it, either one of them. And so
Hmm.
as the funding shifts, priorities shift there too. So I spoke a lot about that. I also talked about situations of ambiguity. When I was doing direct services with people who are struggling, you don't always know what the best answer is or what the best intervention is going to be, but you're there and you're in the moment. And so you have to figure it out. And hopefully you're leaning on your training and best practices and your community practitioners around you to have an impact with someone. And so I spoke a lot about that because I know in tech, you're working on challenges that you don't always know what the answer is or what the
Mm.
impact will be. If they're building a new feature, you can't say, well, when we did this 10 years ago, it did X because the feature didn't exist, the technology didn't exist. And the harms are unknown at this point, too. So I spoke a lot about my comfort with ambiguity and then crisis and stress management, too. Social workers have a lot of experience with crises and high stake situations. That happens a lot in trust and safety work online. You can imagine we talked about folks having a mental health crisis and they're on your platform reaching out for help too. Or you could consider everything from like my time at Twitter when there's political dissidence on the platform and there are very real consequences for them in their country for speaking out against their elected officials to having to intervene to lock their accounts down so that their tweets aren't being used against them. Right? Those are the kinds
Whoa.
of things that our folks get pulled in to do. And we
Mm.
collaborate obviously with legal and public policy and government affairs and sometimes law enforcement on those things. But being comfortable in a crisis and being the calm one in the room is not because I'm just a calm person, but I've got lots of
Yeah.
experience having to deal with this. And so as I was talking, kind of like how I'm talking to y'all right now, the hiring managers were like, oh,
They're
okay,
like,
well,
oh yeah, that
we
makes
guess we could
sense.
take a risk with you, Mr. Social Worker, right? But then I actually found out that there are lots of social workers who are in tech. So we've got quite a bit of community of folks who are successful at doing the same thing. And our goal is to kind of normalize this. That when you see a social worker, especially for trust and safety, you should be thinking, wow, they've got the skills intrinsically and from their training to be able to do this work really well at scale.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's so cool. And I just realized, like, as you were saying that, of just, yeah, just talking with these managers and showing, like, this is what we can bring to the table, and educating people about what social workers, like, the skills that we have. I feel like just with this
Mhm.
podcast too, we are
Mhm.
also sharing with the world and the, the country, the community, our communities of just like, these are things that social workers can do. Like, look at how impactful
Yeah.
you're being.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
anyways,
And
that's
like
so
being
cool.
trained, we're trained on systems and understanding how a system impacts either whether it's a family or a community. Well, like tech and some of the companies you've worked for, it's just a big system with all these different ways that, people can be
Exactly.
impacted. And so like those skills actually really are translatable to that. It's really cool to hear
100%.
you kind of lay it out.
One
I
hundred
love
Hmm.
percent.
that.
I think a lot about. I'm not sure if you all remember. There's like Yuri Brofenbrenner's ecological systems model, and it's like the person in the environment, and then they're also in this
Yes.
large
For
macro
sure.
thing. And like that image is like burned in my head. But that's exactly how I think about my work. When
Yeah.
we have an issue
Yeah.
online, I'm thinking about the user and probably where they are in the world. Their region's
Mm.
understanding of what these online spaces are for, or the norms in
Hmm.
these spaces too. And when we're thinking
Hmm.
about interventions, if
Yeah.
even if it's the right approach, if they don't understand it, right? If it's not repeatable or transparent, is that the right thing for us to be doing? Or are the ways that I think about our work? And then I also think about the context of our platform and a larger ecosystem. Most people
Hmm.
with their iPhone don't just have Spotify on their platform. Like they've got all the other platforms as well, and they're looking for
Yeah.
some kind of consistency, especially when they're in crisis. What is the best practice for when I'm struggling, and I shouldn't have to figure it out depending on which app I open for me.
Mm.
And so all of those things, to your point, Faith, are really, really relevant. And by default, are how social workers think about our work. And it's novel and new to a lot of my colleagues.
That's really, really fascinating. So, okay, getting more into like what you do now, your
Mhm.
roles and your responsibilities in tech. So, for our listeners who may not be familiar, kind of with your position, can you explain what does it mean to be the head of content policy,
Yeah.
and like what does a day to day kind of look like for you, or just give us a little bit more
A
of
lot of
maybe like
things.
ins and
Most of
outs?
my
Yeah.
day is three parts. So it's research and writing, it's managing escalations or issues as they come up, and it's education too.
Okay.
And it can vary. Some days it's all education, other days it's issues. And so research and writing, a lot of times my team is looking at the trends that we're seeing online and understanding what intervention there should be or what policy should be in place if it ends up manifesting on Spotify. Even if not, we still want to understand it and know what's going on. And it's everything from who are the top fans that are beefing with each other right now, because what they're doing is they're doxing each other, they're harassing and abusing each other
Mm.
online. And so knowing that and what those pockets are is like something that we're aware of. We're in the culture, we're in music, but also thinking about everything from like the high risk scenarios. You all remember the Tide Pod challenge where kids were eating Tide Pods,
Leslie, I
right?
think
Yeah.
Leslie brought that up on the
Yeah.
podcast too. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, well, what's our
Crazy.
policy towards eating Tide Pods? And it's like, people are not supposed to eat them. That's the policy, right?
Don't
Like,
do it.
it's one of those things where my team is then kind of called to think about not just what is the issue, but what is the principle that guides this? How is it
Mm.
manifesting on our platform? Do we agree that we want to ensure that we are addressing dangerous challenges that target youth? Because youth probably aren't in development level to be able to defend themselves or think critically about what they're seeing and engaging. And so we might want to draw a hard line around that. And then we start thinking, well, what is that line? Is that line punishment? Is it education? Is it lockouts or timeouts, right? Is it downranking or hiding? All of those things based on the egregiousness. And then from there, once we're kind of aligned on the principle and the policy and the approach, it's getting it built and bought in. So who are the
Mm.
engineers that could build this intervention? Can we get buy-in from our public policy folks to be able to defend and speak to this externally? All of that collaboration happens before something you see in the app comes up.
Wow. It's
It
like, yeah, the
sounds like
policy is
policy.
the policy is the intervention, which is so
Yes.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But what were you going to say, Faith?
No, like it sounds like you're literally working in government in tech.
Your
Like I'm
government
listening
in
to
this
it and I'm like,
in this
yeah, I'm
organization.
like, you are like
Yeah.
talking to stakeholders, trying to lobby certain like groups. Maybe you're
Yeah.
like trying to get people to understand why this would be important, and you're creating kind of checks and balances or boundaries around really ethical issues. Like because, and I don't know, I'm not very good at knowing internet things, but the internet's kind of like the wild, wild west, right? It's not like we have the government really regulating a lot of the internet, I don't think, and that's part of what's so great about it, but also what's so risky about it. So you're like in the weeds of like creating safety in the internet space for youth. It's just like fascinating.
Yeah,
hearing you
totally.
talk about it.
We're also humble about it too.
Yeah.
We operate in almost every major market around the world. And while I can obviously speak to the experience of being like a black person in America, right? I don't know what that experience is like in other countries where I don't even have that context, even historical parts of it. And so we don't try to. That's when experts and our partnerships become really, really helpful for us because, again, social workers, we don't just want to do the thing, we want to do the right thing, the thing that makes sense and helps people ultimately be better afterwards too. And that means being accountable for some of the harms that are created in these spaces. And most of the time it is unintentional. But even if it's unintentional, it's still harmful. And so we have to kind of be accountable for that and be ready to do something about it.
Yeah, when I think about Spotify, it's like that's my main like music listening platform, podcast, whatever.
Yeah.
And when you talk about like abuse and harm, and I'm just like, can you give us a little bit more info about that?
I totally can. And again, a lot of folks in trust and safety operate from the understanding that the majority of people on the platform are not bad actors, right? It is our job to look at all the bad things, but 99% of the time, things are fine. Or people are violating rules unintentionally because they don't know what the rules are, right? Some platforms aren't transparent that they have rules, or those rules came a lot later after the platform was created. And so users are being moderated and they're like, well, when did y'all start caring about this? I've been doing this for 10 years on y'all platform. Y'all are targeting me because I'm black. You're targeting me because I'm from this country or because I'm a Republican or because I'm a Democrat, right? They don't understand why you're doing the thing or the principles that guide it too. And so for me, a lot of time, I'm always thinking about how do we do the right intervention, but also an intervention that's transparent for them. But as I mentioned before, if it's happening offline, it's happening in online spaces too. And so a lot of the unintentional abuse we see are folks who want to be the next popular true crime podcast, right? They found a crime in their neighborhood. Somebody killed the elementary school teacher. We don't know who it is, but they feel like it's their job to solve it. So they turn their phone on and they're like, I think it was so-and-so. That person lives at 152 Huckleberry Lane, right? She works here. She does blah, blah, blah. And then not realizing they are putting this on the internet for the world to see. And if
putting that person in harm's way.
And they could show up at your house trying to hurt you because they believe that you killed the school teacher, kind of thing. And so it's the intent isn't necessarily bad in most cases, but you are publishing someone's private information online for the world. And this is everyone who's got access to your podcast. And that could be a small few who are primed to do something, or it could be a very, very large audience. And so a lot of platforms have policies, including Spotify, around posting private information from individuals without their consent and taking interventions there. But even in that case, the intervention might be, let's take this down because that person's at risk because of it, especially if it's shared non-consensually. But it might be education too, that like, I'm not sure you're aware, but these are the risks when you put someone's home address on the internet without their consent.
How do you send that to them? Just like through like an email,
If you've got an email address, most platforms will communicate you with an email. I would say best practice and gold star is actually in the app, right? Or even gold star would be in the app, but timely. As soon as you're about to publish it, it's like, looks like the title of your podcast might be a home address. Are you sure you want to do that? Like that's what we want to get in the industry, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I see.
That makes a lot of sense.
You mentioned
it's complicated, right?
Yeah.
Because there are also lots of really good use cases for putting private information on the internet. I remember at Twitter covering some of the major hurricanes that were happening. There was that really big one in Texas when I was there at the time, and people were publishing their home address because they were like, send services to come get me, I'm trapped. right? They were tweeting about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that moment, the platform's like, oh, we're going to allow this. And we had automated systems taking it down, and we had to work cross function and make sure that content was still available so people could get help there too.
So it's
Wow.
not black and white, right?
Yeah.
It's dynamic. There's
It's
so many different,
gray all the time. And
gray.
social workers live in the gray, don't
Yeah.
we?
Yes,
Right?
yes, definitely. I
Right.
have one more question. Okay. The Spotify, I'm just like
It's
mind blowing.
fascinating. I know.
My
Yeah.
mind is blown. You talked about if someone's having like a mental health crisis or like how does that manifest through a platform like Spotify? Like, what have
For
you seen?
playlists, right? So people can talk about their suicidal ideation or the songs they listen to cope with their thoughts about hurting themselves. And right, anybody can title their playlist anything that they like. And so in those moments, that can be really alarming and concerning to others, especially if you don't know the person. You don't know if this is real. Are they gone? What happened
So
to them?
so they could like title a playlist like my last songs or something like
Yep.
that. That is
Songs
just
before I die, right?
Gotcha.
Kinds
So
of
like,
things.
what would be the intervention there? Like, if you were to see that, or that would get like flagged somehow through your systems, like what would be the
Well, a few
intervention?
things. So if you are searching for suicide and self-harm terms on the platform, the first
Yeah.
response you get is not content, it's a response from us. It's like, hey, if you are experiencing challenges, here's where you can go to get support. And a lot of times those are localized resources that are provided to us by a third party because we want
Got
folks
it.
to know, even if they're not or they're being hyperbolic or etc., they know there's supports out there, not that you should continue with it or develop a plan and all of those things. And so that comes from research and experts like Jet Foundation and others who partner with us on those things. And then depending on how it manifests on the platform, we want to also be doing an intervention that is timely and makes the most sense for them too. What we want to avoid is punishment. A lot of times people are doing this because they're reaching out for support or they want someone to notice. And so you don't want to shut that door. And again, I know that from my social work training, but how we got the business to be bought in to it is through the third party experts and the researchers who've studied this for their lives.
Wow.
It makes
That's
sense.
fascinating.
Yeah. So much good work in the online. I'm like, this is a lot, right? Like, it makes sense. Their social workers need to be in tech or social worker. Yeah. Which I think like, one of the other questions we had for you was, you said you worked at Twitter, and I'm curious, like, what did your role look like there? Like, what kind of work did you kind of do? You mentioned a little bit
The same
with like the hurricane
work,
stuff,
I think at Spotify, I talked about the three kinds. So it's policy and research and writing. It's the escalation, like things are really, really bad. Then also a lot of education internally. I'm meeting with executives, I'm meeting with cross-functional teams, helping them understand our issues, why they matter, and what they can do about them, especially the folks who are really passionate about it. There's so much we can do in this space and to be done, especially as the technology accelerates and is available in everyone's life. At Twitter, it was those three things, except mostly escalations and urgent issues. My former VP did a really fantastic TED Talk years ago where she talked about the challenges of scale. And so if there's a 1 in a million chance that something really, really bad was happening on the platform at any given moment, because Twitter had 500 million tweets a day, that meant 500 times a day around the globe, something really bad was happening. A kid was being trafficked in a DM, right? Or someone was threatening to kill themselves or threatening to blow up a federal building or something anywhere in the world. Or they've got their phone out and they're watching a natural disaster unfold and people are being killed on live, live
Stream,
stream,
right? And that's what it felt like. We were in the trenches all of the time. And again, social workers, I think, are uniquely positioned for that kind of work because we are sensitive to the signs of burnout, right? We're always thinking about what it takes to be resilient. How do we fill our cup so that we can do good work? And I think that time used every little bit of social work training I had because we saw some of the worst stuff. Twitter was where people broke news. It was where people talked about how they were feeling. It was very, very real and very, very human, especially at that time when I was there. And so, again, if it was happening offline, it was happening there too in real time.
So your job, like when, you're going to work at Twitter, like what
Mhm.
is your job? Like what's the task for you to do? Do you need, you're just going through tweets and looking at and just trying to like, okay, no,
Mhm.
what?
No, 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 no. Usually for me and my team, when something was gray and or represented a gap in our policy or high profile and it really needed alignment on not just what to do, but what are our principles that we can defend, that's when my team was looped in. But that was often too. And not because we were bad policy practitioners or anyone at the company was bad. It
Right.
was the relationship between what was happening offline and our policies and the technology too. So you think about a platform just to talk to someone else, right? And you layer on the fact that everybody in the world can see that conversation, including people with context about what you're talking about and people without it, right? That's one big dynamic that colored a lot of our work. Think about Game of Thrones if you watched it, right? And someone sharing a clip of one of the sexual violence
Oof.
scenes from that was all over that show, and then someone
Yeah.
sees it and like, oh, this is promoting rape culture, and it's like
Oh, like
Yeah.
they
you
report
didn't
Right.
it.
want, yeah, you didn't.
Right.
They think it's pornographic. They don't know where it's from. They didn't watch the show because
Mhm.
it's not available in their country, for example. But they're
Mhm.
reporting it, and we're having to be accountable for that too, because it's sexual violence in the video that everyone can see. Right? It's everything from those misunderstandings from people witnessing versus what's happening or how people talk, um, to the technology itself, right? And then mis and disinformation as well. People have their phone out thinking they're sharing in real time what's going on, but as social workers know, a lot of people can be looking at the same situation and taking very different things away from it. And so when you layer video on top of it too, even if it's first person, there are lots of interpretations about what could be going on. Or when you think about
Mm.
the complexity of culture too. I'm also an out gay man, and I think about the videos I see online of people voguing, right, or drag queens
Mhm.
getting ready, and then folks who don't have that context for what it is, or that content's illegal in their country, right? All of those things make for a wide variety of messes and escalations that platforms have to deal with and explain in any given moment.
This is so. I'm like sitting here just like in awe.
I
We talk
know.
about. I'm like because honestly, because there's so many layers.
There's
Because
so
you're
many
right.
layers.
The internet is not like one country or one state or one
Right.
county or
Like
one
Twitter is
family.
in what,
There
every country,
every country, so there's like layers of gender and race,
and
and then there's like
culture.
culture and
Yeah.
then religion and
And
then
language too.
And
and
Hmm.
language,
language.
and there's so many layers here. And not only do you need, yeah, like you have to think about that when you work with a family,
Hmm.
right? Like a family can experience trauma in 5 different ways,
Hmm.
right? So then you think about how somebody's experiencing a video, and then the amount of people and the different cultures and the different layers. It's fascinating. And then you think about, well, we don't only need social workers who understand all of that, but you need, so like our profession is not diverse.
Hmm.
So like it's a lot of white women, right, in our profession. Well, you need people in tech who are from diverse backgrounds and diverse cultures who can understand these nuances and these layers. It's just,
Yeah, and
yeah, my mind, that's what my mind is thinking about.
feel empowered to
Yeah.
speak up too.
Yeah.
It's not enough to have a diverse group of folks if those folks don't feel empowered. Like their own identity experiences are relevant here and can be
Yeah.
valuable too. Because I think a lot of folks in corporate spaces generally want to come in and just kind of assimilate and be like, don't notice any difference about me. I'm here to
Yeah.
do my job and make money. But for me, I think again for my social work practice, I encourage my team to lean into that because context is everything in our work. When we're talking about artists in India, for example, I didn't grow up there. I don't know who the top 5 artists in India do, but I have people on my team who do, and they can tell us
Mhm.
those kinds of things. And I'm like, don't be silent in that moment. Let us
Mhm.
know. We want to do what's right there too. But you're exactly right. What you're saying about a family and how they can experience issues, and then kind of going back to that ecological systems model, it's like there's also culture and norms around that as well. And these norms are in online platforms too. And a lot of times we're thinking about what kinds of norms and incentives are we creating and reinforcing simply by how the platform is designed. And a platform like
Mhm.
Twitter or social media platforms generally are designed to amplify the things that are really, really scary or emotionally charged, that gets a lot more clicks, a lot more engagement. And that dynamic can make for really, really bad outcomes that only exist because the platform exists. One of the things that used to really bother me are fight videos. I'm not sure what
Mm,
your experience was in middle school, but a lot of times you get into fights, you see people fight. But when I was
yeah.
growing up, like they fight, and whoever saw it, and then we all move on, and we all graduate and go on. But now these videos live forever
Yeah.
online, and it's not
Mm,
just your school and your classmates that know about it. It's the world, and you've got people who are much older than you, who don't know you, who don't even speak your language, having an opinion about whether or not that person beat you up good enough, right? And it's like how young people are supposed to manage that
Yeah.
is kind of beyond me. But it's an issue that
mhm,
only exists because of technology that exists and
Absolutely.
how it's
mhm.
shared. And so my main goal is to ensure that platforms are accountable for that and doing something about that to make sure people are okay.
Mm,
That's awesome.
super
Should we get
interesting.
into
Okay,
compensation
let's
and
do it.
Hmm.
So let's talk
career
about
growth?
compensation, career growth.
Yeah.
Um, if you could share just your salary progression or
Mhm.
general salary ranges that you've seen
Yeah.
for tech roles that social workers would be,
Hmm. Yeah.
eligible for.
So tech generally pays really well, especially if you're one of the big companies. If you're a startup, it might vary depending on what the startup is and what they do and where they're based. But when I started at Twitter, I came in at what they would call the entry level role. And so obviously, excuse me, as you heard, I had experience before I got there. I had a whole career and
Yeah.
a life before I got there. I also had a graduate degree. And so even though I came in at entry level, my starting salary was 90,000 plus equity too. And so for me,
Oh,
I
Nice.
didn't negotiate because that was about 30,000 more than I was making doing my public policy role that I loved, right? And I was really,
and you're
really
just
good
like
at before I
30K
got
We're
that
like
more.
job.
90.
Yeah.
That's
And
such
so
a
Yes.
they called and said 90. I was like, all right, where do I sign? Like,
exactly. That's exactly.
why are you sitting here quiet on the phone? Like, just email it to me, all right? Like, I'll get it back to you ASAP. Right. And so it was higher than what I was making before, but then also it was about 50,000 higher than what I was doing when I was giving direct services. Right. And so
Yeah.
for
Hmm,
me, I
hmm.
remember like calling all my family. I remember coming home to my partner and being like, we get a new apartment. Like,
Yeah,
I
we're
was like,
going shopping.
yeah, I was like, we are going to be fine. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
And then when I
Hmm.
got there, I was just like, all right, I'm gonna stay here until y'all fire me. I will make $90,000 for the rest of my life, and I'll move on. Like
Yep.
literally, that's what I was thinking. Like,
What
just
year
prove
was that?
myself.
What
This
year
was
was
Yeah.
that?
What year?
2015, and
Okay.
so it was
Okay.
really just like, let me just prove myself because this is fine. And then
Hmm.
equity, and so kind of taking a step back. When you get a job in tech, most platforms provide what they call total compensation. So the offer they discuss is actually really, really high. So what they do is your base salary plus your equity. And your equity is usually in the form of RSUs or restricted stock units. Have you all spoken
Hmm.
about that on
We
the
haven't
platform?
We
spoken.
haven't.
We
We
haven't.
we
No.
So
should.
Yeah.
restricted
Give.
Yeah.
stock units are stock in the company, but they're restricted in the sense that they vest over time. So if you get
Mm.
$10,000 as part of your equity package, you can't just take $10,000 out of your Charles file. What it means is after your first year, usually one third of that is available for you to withdraw. And then every 3 months, a certain chunk comes out. So after 4 years, you would have gotten that full $10,000. That's how it works.
Okay.
Um, and equity tends to be the thing that folks or companies can play with the most. And so if they push back on not your base salary, they can likely change your equity and increase that for you. You should always
Mm.
negotiate. And there are other things you can negotiate too. If they're like, well, we're hard on your equity and we're hard on your salary, they might give you a sign-on bonus too, which is something else I learned that I should have asked for because other people joined and got
Yeah.
$5,000 just for saying yes, right? And the only stipulations with a sign-on bonus is you usually have to be at the company for a year or they make you get that money back, right? So you don't like,
Right.
so people aren't joining a company, getting $10,000 and being like,
And then bouncing.
Bye.
and then getting offers
Yeah.
over and over, right? So that's a stipulation. But again, I was
Yeah.
like, there's no social work job I apply to that they're like, here's money just for saying yes. Like,
Here's money just for saying
Right.
yes. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
seeing that now with like healthcare positions,
Mm.
like social work, because we're very needed there, but like here's money for just saying yes. Here's equity in the company. Like
Company.
that's a conversation that if I was new grad, no one has talked to me about this. No one in my family, if a lot of us are first gen college students, it's like we don't have people to kind of advise us on things like this,
Nope.
Are they
Right.
do tech companies also offer like I don't retirement benefits and like matches and things like that? Okay.
Yes,
Yes, like that's
401k, all
yeah.
the above. Really good.
Yeah.
Rental service and supports, all the bells and whistles. And again, once I got the salary, I was like, I don't care. They were going through the benefits. I was like, okay, great.
Like I'm making 90K as a
Yeah,
social
I was
worker.
like,
No,
I'm
how-
good.
yeah. I was like, do y'all
I'm
want my first child? Like, I don't care. Like, I'm making money. All right. Like, I didn't really care about that kind of stuff. And so they have so many benefits. And it's like, great, fantastic. Now, as like, I've been doing this for a while and like we own our first home, all that stuff, like those kind of benefits make a lot of sense. And I care a lot about my health and now my eyes are getting bad because I'm getting older. So like all of those benefits now make sense to me. But then I was like, well, my base salary, like, you don't have to give me anything. Like, this is fine. Like, I'll be all right. And as you stay with a company, like you get the stock that vests over time, right? You also get pay bumps and increases. It's very, very normal to get like a 2 to 3% bump every year just because if the company is doing well. And so you grow over time. And so I won't say how much I make now, but it is
That's
more
fair.
than that. And
Yeah.
Yes.
it has grown. The expectation is that it will grow. And as you move up a level, it will increase significantly. And most folks, some of the things I see people do, especially people of color, is to move and hop around. Because as you hop around, you're renegotiating your
Yes.
salary and reassessing what the companies think your skills are worth. I always encourage people I mentor to like still do interviews. Even if you're happy in your job, still do interviews. Find out what your skills are worth on the market. Because in corporate spaces, this is a transaction, right? You may do good, hard, trust and safety work, but if the company thinks it's not important, they will fire you, right? And so be there for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Which you're kind of getting into the next topic that we want to talk about too, which is like advice for social workers who want to get into tech. Because I would imagine a lot of our listeners, as Taylor and I are feeling, are like, this is so amazing. This
We're
is
like
so
fan
cool.
we're like fangirling over this niche or this
I know.
like path for
Because
social workers.
It's just not something we talk about in grad school
Yeah.
at all. We talk about direct, client care. We do not talk about this. So it's fascinating. So like what would be some like first steps social workers could take if they're curious about tech, kind of dipping their toes in, like what would be your advice there?
So if they're curious about technology, specifically about trust and safety, I would encourage them to start reading. There are so many articles. Now that you all know about trust and safety and content moderation, I feel like you're going to see articles now every day. There is something about how YouTube or Snapchat or Instagram or Meta or whoever messed up royally related to how they moderated or didn't moderate content. There's so much out there about like online
Content
regulation and how that's
moderation,
impacting. I'm sure you've seen the things about like countries saying, well, you have to be 18 to use social media now, right? Like all of that stuff is related to trust and safety and online content moderation. So I would encourage them to get curious. I'm one of the advisors for the Trust and Safety Professional Association, so TSPA, kind of like how we have the National Association of Social Workers. It's TSPA does the same thing for folks in my profession too, and they publish
Cool.
tons of resources and case studies online about issues that platforms have tackled, how they managed it, and other resources there. So read definitely.
Oh,
When
that's
it comes
fascinating.
to like the artifacts, so like your resume, I always encourage folks to be thinking about the three things I talked about too. How are you talking about how you work in a fast-paced environment, addressing ambiguity, being flexible, being good in a crisis. But also the thing I see most that's missing from resumes is the so what too. You need to make sure you talk about your impact. Because even if I don't know what social workers do, you having an impact, making a business better, impacting their bottom line, making them more efficient, achieving strategic goals, all of that stuff is generally understandable in corporate spaces. And so I always tell people, if you're got a line item that says, I provided counseling to 40 seniors, right? Or my caseload is 40 clients, etc. That's fantastic, right? You're having a big impact, particularly in a community. But I would say I did that increasing our ability to achieve our strategic priority or address a core community that had previously not been addressed, right? Like the impact, the so what, why should I care about this in
Ooh,
addition
that's
to
good.
quantifying is really, really helpful. Because like I said, if I don't know what social workers do, but your resume looks like you constantly have an impact at any company you're at, in any role, that's someone that I'm generally interested in too. So always do the so what. The second
Mm.
thing is relationship building. Again, something that social workers are good at. But LinkedIn is your friend. It is your friend. I would encourage folks, if they're interested in particular companies or particular teams, start reaching out to folks who work on those teams and definitely reach out to recruiters. I would send a note to a recruiter and say, hey, I saw you're hiring for this role. My name is Jarrell. I've got 6+ years of crisis management and relationship building experience. I'm really comfortable in situations of ambiguity. I'm really passionate about your organization's mission. I'd love to get coffee to talk about how I could be a good fit for your team. They don't have to respond, right? And you really only need one or two to bite because they can give you really good context about your resume, about the company, why or why not they think you could be good. But I remember my first interview in tech wasn't actually at Twitter. It was with a recruiter for a different, very large tech company, but it had been someone I've been talking to on LinkedIn for almost 5 months before she was like, oh, we actually have this role that you might be a good fit for. And so the relationship building piece is also really important. If you're just applying online, good luck to you. Like people still get jobs that way, right? They're not necessarily skipping the line, but just know it is so easy to apply for a job. And if
You're right.
you're trying to get one of those good companies, like when we open a role at Spotify, overnight we have thousands of people apply, right?
Ooh.
Because they all want to work there. And so
it kind of becomes who you know.
it's who you know, but also humans are taking shortcuts, right? If I have the choice of reading 1,000 resumes versus I've got 20 people who've shown initiative in my inbox on LinkedIn, I might start there, especially if some of them sounded interesting to me.
Interesting.
And then once I've exhausted that and anyone that the hiring
Mhm.
manager already had in mind from the industry, then I want to go to those 1,000 resumes. But also, I'm not going to read 1,000 resumes because you can't. No one's
No.
got time for that.
Yeah,
So you're going to
no,
spot check.
definitely.
Like, who was at Facebook? Who was here? That kind of thing. And so the relationship building piece, getting on people's radar and getting the insights of what companies are looking for, I think is the best way to land a job in tech.
I love that.
It's
Yeah.
something that we hear from a lot of, you know, people who come on the podcast is like networking and like just send the email,
Mhm.
send them a DM, like get in their inbox, right, Taylor? And be
Yeah,
bold
we need
about
to
that, 'cause
be.
I think we,
I know. I
yeah,
think that's.
yeah,
This is another time for
a
us to be
theme.
like social workers. Be bold. Like you got
Mhm.
this. You're awesome. You have amazing skills that you can bring to the table, and
Mhm.
like toot your own horn. Go after it. Like
Mhm.
we have to put ourselves out there. I think sometimes we just kind of, like you said, it's easy to apply to a job online. There are thousands of
Mhm.
people that are doing it, but it's
Mhm.
sometimes we have to take that extra step to really move
Yeah.
the needle
Yeah.
or break into an industry that you've never been in. I feel like especially with that scenario, it's like, yeah, you really need to be proactive. Like just applying and not really following up with people and not making connections
Yeah.
isn't going to
Let
really
the
help.
company tell you no, right? I see a lot of people who
Yeah.
are so bold and applying for something like, sir, you know you can't do this job, right? But you apply and you sent me a note on LinkedIn, and it's just like my favorite thing to it. It's sad, but like I work in trust and safety. A lot of times the roles say safety X, safety policy, safety specialist, etc. And so we get lots of EMTs and firefighters who are applying, and I'm like,
Wow.
you do a different kind of safety.
That's
sir.
a different
Like,
kind of
I'm not
safety.
doing CPR on anybody at Spotify, right? And I'm so glad that you are certified in CPR, but you can't do this job. But that person applied, sent me a note on LinkedIn, reached out and is ready to come save
Aw.
lives, right? I'm like, and I have other people who are like, oh, I didn't think I could do it because, I've never worked in tech. And I'm like, no, you're a social worker. You got tons of skills. Like, let us tell you no. Like, don't discount yourself.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that mental like leap that social workers have to overcome, which is like, I can't work in tech. I'm not technical.
We get in our
and, like,
own
convincing
way.
ourselves. We get in our own way. We get in our own
Yeah.
way. And part of that is graduate work and like what we are
Our
funneled
messaging.
into,
Mhm.
Yeah.
our messaging that we receive. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
It's hard. You asked the question
Yeah.
around like the transition to Twitter. That was one of the hardest humps for me. I want to be respectful of time too. But just
Yeah.
really, really quickly, when I started, as I was observing the people around me who had larger career aspirations than Twitter, like I told you, I got there and I got my salary, and I was like, I'm just gonna stay here until y'all let me retire, but kind of. But then the other folks who were getting promoted, who were getting bigger projects, they were outspoken. They were constantly selling their impact and their skills and
You're
talking
so
really
right.
loud. And I was just
Mm.
like, I'm team proof is in the pudding. Look at the things I've done. Like, I don't have to tell you I'm great. Like, look at my
Mhm.
work, right? Ask about me, kind of thing. And I was like, that doesn't really
It doesn't
work
really
in
work
corporate
because
spaces,
yeah, I feel
you
like even
know?
in nonprofit, I felt that way.
hmm And it's
Mm.
like, oh, then I need to get comfortable talking about my impact and the skills I
Yeah.
bring and the unique perspective that I have on my work. Too, that's just, it's a mix of personality, right? But also, I think our training, like we are in the background. If a family does really, really well,
Yes.
or a system or a project scales, it's like, great. I'm so
Yeah, we're
glad I
not
got to
going
help
around
them.
being like, yeah, look what we did. Look at that
hmm
policy I passed and whatever. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But
Yeah.
maybe we need a podcast episode about this of just like how do we talk about ourselves and like how can we kind of bring more of that in. So yeah.
Even if you're just pretending, my partner and I talk about, we turn it on, right? Like I can turn it on.
Yeah.
I can make you think that the work I do is the most important work at this entire company and that everybody should care about it, right? And that's what I learned when I was doing my practicum at the White House. It's like, how do you make your issue someone else's issue and get really comfortable selling the importance of it and marketing yourself and your skills as a solution too?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that's good. Before we let you go, I feel like we need to ask this one question, which is kind of more macro.
Mm.
And it's more about like, why do you think so many social workers are leaving the field?
Mm.
And could tech and like getting into tech be part of like a solution, like an attractive way to maybe retain talent, bring talent back to the field, or
Mhm.
like recruit talent? I don't know if I'm making sense.
I think it could be. So in terms of why, I can imagine lots of reasons based on my experience. Underpaid, under-resourced, underappreciated, overworked, right? All of those things were true when I was doing it. But for me, my focus, like I said, was I wanted to have a larger impact. And it felt like working at a more macro level meant I could impact not just the communities or the individuals that I cared about, but larger systems and structures. And I'm really, really lucky that my role allows me to have a positive impact in the lives of millions of people who use our service from all over the world. And in having that kind of aspiration for more scale, more money kind of came with that. I remember people used to always say, well, do what you're passionate about. Follow your passion and money will chase you. And I was always like, the money's going real slow. Like it's not even close. Right. But I think in my case, thinking about tech and scale has helped in that way. And so it could be an answer for a lot of folks. It's not for everyone, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of trade-offs in working in corporate
Yeah.
spaces too. And I'm sure like even that long exhale, Taylor, like I think you know, right? There are microaggressions. There's all kinds of things that come with being in these spaces. They can be really cutthroat, right? Everyone's not your friend here. Not everyone's bought into the mission or even cares about it, right?
Ooh,
All of those things I think I took for
So
granted
true.
in some of my previous workplaces that
interesting.
are the trade-offs you make for that extra salary, right?
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can do a whole episode on that. Happy to come back and talk about
Yeah.
the challenges of being in corporate spaces.
Oh yes, you will
Yeah.
be back.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm already saying it. You're coming back.
You're coming back. Yeah.
This was amazing. Thank you so much, Darrell, for being
Yeah.
here and sharing all of this. I'm just like, I hope everyone thinks this is like as interesting and fascinating as Faith and I do, which I think that they will because like
Fingers crossed.
we've
Yeah.
mentioned multiple times that this is just not a conversation that we've had in school or just really as I've gone through the profession and yeah, it's like I just learned about this last month. So
Right.
this
Yeah.
is amazing. So yeah, this is a call out. If you love this episode, this content, just give us a little something. Give us a review. We recently saw some comments on Spotify, which is like seems like a new thing that people can like comment on an episode.
Yeah.
Surprise! So let us know what you think about this this content, and as always, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later.